Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question actually on like overall how much our thinking is going to be required on the long run, because frankly, ChatGPT knows a lot more papers than I have ever even heard of, right? But I think where we come in as human beings is the type of questions we can ask. And then where us come in as CROs is that, of course, all of those previous experiments that were run, and we have recognized that making this protein cost $20,000, and that's like a huge impact on the budget, would never be something that could be retrievable from an AI. It's like this human lived experience, if we can call it that. I'm really clutching at straws because I hope we will continue to have a job. Yeah, and then maybe creativity around it, as well as like how you mix between timeline pressures, budget pressures. You want to bust a patent, but you have to follow the patent, even though they used an essay that was like popular in the 80s, and there's so many better essays now out there. But if you want to bust it, you have to use the same one because no one's going to believe you that you have a better asset. These sorts of things still require, I think, a bit of a human touch.
Before we get into today's show, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have going on over here at Succession. So Succession is a life science sales membership that includes on-demand courses to up-level your sales skills, resources to plan and execute your sales process, a community for peer-to-peer networking and learning, and live workshops delivered by experts twice a month. You can get access to all of this as an individual for just $79 a month, or you can up-level your entire sales team with courses and customized learning designed for each individual rep. Come and join us over at succession.bio. Okay, let's dive back into the show.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today, I've managed to tie Harrison up and pin him down so he lets me do the intro for a change. Managed to stop him talking. Today, we have Kinga on the show. She's recently promoted to SVP of Business Development for Arcturus. It's a really interesting company around AI and drug discovery, but I'll let her explain more of that. What did you like about this episode, Harrison?
Yeah, I think we talked about a few things that are really interesting. Sort of the changing role of CROs, where in the past, the CRO might have been just extra hands or an extension of your lab, but now they're being expected to be more strategic and provide more insights and guidance and advice to their clients. I think we talked a little bit about solution selling, complex deals, obviously AI and drug discovery, and then how to use tactical listening to help sort of elevate yourself in a conversation with people that might be more experienced with you. So a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the stuff about how to tactical listening, and also, like you said, what kind of level you should be at when you're in a conversation was really good. Well, what do you normally say? Then normally make me say at this point.
Let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Hey, Kinga, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here.
Hi, both. Thank you for having me.
Really excited to have you along.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, we prepped you a little bit ahead of time, gave you a heads up. So we asked the same question to everybody. Give us a crazy or funny story that's happened in your career.
Well, I didn't realize it was crazy until you told me so. So I might as well tell the audience about it. I guess it's the way I exited academia and entered into BD was on, I guess we could call it serendipitous circumstances. I was very keen to exit. I was too loud, had too many children. Scientifically, I was very successful, but just didn't seem like the right culture fit for me. So I phoned up as many friends as I could based on LinkedIn posts of palm trees and good life. That was like my primary selection criteria as to who must have a good job. I really didn't know what I wanted to do other than that I wanted to do a job that would reward me based on performance and not based on perceptions, which is, I think, something that academia is notoriously famous for. So I spoke to one of my friends, asked him to have a coffee, and we actually did a consultancy workshop with University College London before together, and we ended up leading the same team, and it worked super well. We were really gelling together really well, and he said, well, instead of a coffee, how about a job? So that came as a bit of a surprise, and I had no idea what business development was. The only kind of concept I had of it was that it would be something like Dragon's Den, so it would involve a lot of confidence building and having nice chats with people who care about performance rather than about perceptions. So I basically said yes, and I had a grant with the Wellcome Trust at the time and another 2 years to go on my postdoc, but I've already published really good paper, and I really just I think I needed it for my emotional and mental well-being to have a change. So I just said yes. I gave back the grant. And frankly, I don't think I had any of the qualifications that they would have required for the job on paper. So that helped me immensely to jump out. And it turned out to not to be Dragon's Den, but maybe even something better. So I think I really found my own luck in a way, but I definitely needed luck to be where I am today.
No, that's awesome. And for those from America that are listening, Dragon's Den is the UK version of Shark Tank.
Yeah. And I think there's seems to be a common theme with people that have made the accidental jump is that they seem to embody a quote that I like. And I think it's Richard Branson, which he said something like, if someone offers you a great opportunity and you don't know how to do it, say yes and work out how to do it. Right. And I think that's a lot of the ways people end up into the sales process, and probably that risk taking helps them.
Yeah, I think it's self-selecting, isn't it? Are you crazy enough to say yes to something you don't quite know what it is? But there's palm trees involved. So from my perspective, it was a straightforward choice.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, so many of the stories that we've heard from everybody we've talked to on this podcast, just accidentally fallen into sales, or very serendipitously it's happened. And so, yeah, I think for those that haven't yet made that jump and are thinking about wanting to make that transition, it's like, just go for it, right? Give it a shot and see if you like it. And I mean, one of the key points that you made is you're now measured on performance. And so you're responsible for your success, and you're not, perception is no longer, I mean, it's a little bit of a, it's still involved a little bit, but, it's still heavily based on performance. If you're crushing it from a sales perspective, people will, respect you. You'll stay around. You're going to get paid well. So,
Absolutely. And I think another aspect to it is this remote working and flexibility in terms of working hours as well. I've got quite many children. I should name it 3, because when I say this, people always think of 5+, but no, not quite, but just too many for academia. And I always felt like I was seen as the lazy one a little bit in the lab, because I would do my experiments and then I would have to rush to pick someone up, statistically speaking, every day, pretty much. And then here, it's such flexible working, especially when we work globally with clients. Sometimes I can work after bedtime, for example, and I'm seen as this like really incredibly hardworking person. All of a sudden, whilst in academia, I had my best ideas after bedtime, but nobody acknowledged that as work.
Yeah.
It's this measurement on performance rather than time. That is a big factor for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You've got 3 boys, and Nick's got 3 girls. So opposite ends of the spectrum here.
We should get them together one day and observe the mayhem that follows.
Exactly. You said you have many, and I've got 3, and that's normal. So when you say many, I think 12, right? Because 3 is normal, so many must be multiples of many. Something else you said as well. You said you found your own luck to get where you are today. And while we're here, I just wanted to say congratulations, because where you are today is a recent promotion, right?
Yes. Thank you very much. I've just been made Senior Vice President of Business Development at Arcturus.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Well done.
It's exciting.
Thank you.
So the recognition and hard work of whatever hours they may be pays off.
Yeah. Definitely does. And I think it also fills me with self-confidence that I don't have to measure myself either on number of hours. And yeah, again, that's another funny story. And where I used to work for my postdoc, you would be measured on the number of cheese clubs that you'd attend. And I was notoriously bad at cheese clubbing because it was 7 p.m. fast, I love cheese.
What was I saying? So anyone who's lactose intolerant never gets promoted.
Never. Wow. You have to eat the vegan cheese.
Yeah, no one wants that.
Awesome. Okay, so you made the transition into sales, and you started off in CROs, and I think you've pretty much been more service providers for your sales BD career. But yeah, I think we were talking about this on the pre-show about how the CRO, or the role of a CRO, is changing, and that it needs to continue to evolve in order to keep up with the rest of the industry. Maybe you can share a little bit about how was it when you first started, kind of how is it transitioning, and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, so I would say when I started, which wasn't that long ago, actually. So I think the other upside is much faster career development than in academia. I think 6-7 years ago was when I made the jump, and I was a bit of an unconventional BD. although I would say the CRO that I worked at first, which is Champions Oncology, was already recognizing this shift that was happening, that we needed BDs who were experts, or there's this famous saying from American CBOs that know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
But basically, salespeople were started to be expected by clients to understand the topic of the conversation. And actually, they recognize that if we could be partners, maybe not same level, but very close to the client in understanding, then we would sell more. And then this ties really nicely in with solution selling. So clients not only not have a lab anymore, sometimes they will also lack the expertise. Or we have seen 20 studies that are very similar in terms of structure, and what made them succeed and what made them fail is something that we have as a know-how, which no biotech, or I would even dare to say pharma biologist would have under their belt, just purely because of the number of studies we see is way higher than the number of studies they would have run. So this kind of experience combined with relevant expertise. So I have a PhD, but that's, more for decoration for the wall. What is really important is that I was a scientist, and I keep myself up to date as well with the science, and it positions me really well to advise clients on how to get to their research questions. Even when they think they know, they might not know all the intricacies of, plus minus 2 mouse is easily 5K. That makes a huge difference in the outcome of your study. But of course, it's a balance with the budget. So if you have a BD who can be credible in that environment, you get a much better outcome, both for the budget and also for the scientific question at hand. So this then forms into something that we call solution selling, which one would think that the client's responsibilities come with the problem for. But we tend to find that the beginning of the conversation compared to where we end with the conversation is quite far away from each other. So essentially, it's a consultancy role that I really enjoy personally.
Walk us through that a little bit, because I also noticed that most people come to you or come to their to sales professionals or to other companies where they think they have a particular problem, or they're trying to maybe get to a particular outcome, but they don't actually know what the real root cause of the problem is. What are the symptoms of it? What's the actual extent of the impact? They don't know all of the different potential solutions out there. And I've seen a lot of younger, more inexperienced reps kind of have the false belief that because they're talking to a PhD, or because they're talking to the customer knows best, or the client knows best. They know the problems that they have. They know what they need. They know their solutions. They've done all the research. When we know, as more experienced people, like that's just not the case. So how do you navigate that when a client comes to you and says, "Hey, here's what's going on"? How do you sort of challenge them around their assumptions without it coming off as, I don't know, being rude, or like telling them what to do, or showing them that they're not they haven't really figured this stuff out on their own?
Yeah, I think it's a really delicate balance to get right. I think luckily for Actoris and the CROs I've worked at before, I was always in this subject matter expert type of a role, and we had, all of these companies existed because there was a need other than just the lab or just the service itself. So the starting point of the relationship, unless it's cold calling, right, which is different, or some sort of like scientist.com type of a request, which just comes in and is sent out to 10 CROs. Most people do want our input, but of course they don't like hearing that their question is not the right one. That's pushing it a little bit too far. But it's building these relationships, so not necessarily straight away undermining the question, but working around it together. And I think taking people on the journey with you is what makes them feel like that they can rely on you, and then ultimately be an extension to their team. And of course, now I had enough years of being surprised, by really senior people really appreciating input with way more experience than what I have. But I've run 20 of those essays that they were looking to run, and they haven't run any to date, or they have run one, for example. So I think sometimes looks can also be deceiving in terms of who knows more. And as long as it's an amicable, peer-to-peer relationship, and we are not forcing our opinion on other people, they hopefully will leave the call feeling like they've been advised really well. And I do the same with my team as well, who might have less experiences, to empower them, get them to shadow, see examples. I think when you see examples of these cases where you wouldn't have thought that you'd know anymore because the client is extremely senior in a large pharma with 40 years experience. And then you have an example where it's like a clear-cut case that you did have something to contribute that was of value. Then it fills you with confidence, and then you can carry yourself forward with this type of attitude, even if it's just, stopping by at a poster at a conference. I think it's something that builds up over time with experience.
I think that a couple of things you said there, I just sort of wanted to highlight, not mansplain, highlight, because they were really important. That's a reference to something we was chatting about earlier. So I always say to people, you need to walk into the room as an equal. And that's important in both directions. And you said this, you don't want to be acting like you're superior and know more. But equally, if you put yourself as a inferior person, then everything you say has less value. So you have to come in as an equal, know where your expertise are, but also know where your limitations are. Because if I walked in and started trying to lecture you on AI drug discovery, I'm really going to fail and show my limited knowledge, right? However, if I started talking about stem cells, an area I'm particularly passionate about, we'd be able to have a good conversation where we can both add to it. And I think that's the key, is going with the confidence in what you know, and know that you probably have a broad understanding of the landscape better than people in the lab can, because they have to work so hard on their one thing. And if you can do that, you get really valuable interactions.
Yeah, I mean, especially this case that you mentioned where you run this assay 20 times and they haven't. So the same sort of concept, like if you're a rep, you've talked to 20 of these different types of clients, 50 of these different types of clients in the past. You've seen the sort of aggregate of challenges or aggregate of problems that they faced, and also the solutions that they've tried and or failed to deploy, right? So you have this, like, all of this knowledge that you can share with this other person sitting across from you who doesn't have that. So it's like a different set of expertise, where they might have the expertise in their science, in their domain. You have the expertise in like everything else that surrounds it that you know really well.
Yeah, and I think that's worth its weight in gold. And it's also not something we charge for. So I think the upside of working with CROs like ourselves is that you actually get advice completely for free. And then it's your choice whether or not to place the study with us. Some people might still choose to place it with another provider who might be located in a different location where FTE prices are lower, for example. But overall, we are building these type of relationships with a view on long-term investment. So there will come the day when the study will be complex enough, or logistically it will be too difficult to work with China, for example. Then we will be in prime position because we have the expertise and the know-how and are willing to share it. And of course, I'm not talking about anything that's like previous client-specific information. It's just high-level knowledge of how to power an animal study, how many animals to put in each group, or what sort of controls to use in a plate-based assay, which we just accumulate a lot of knowledge for that's not specific to any client, but can be useful to everyone in the field. Right. I think in a way, it's similar to this idea of publishing failed experiments, which nobody does. But we have seen why it has failed, and then we can warn people from cutting corners with controls in particular. I think that's a recurring theme, is spending all that money on a control just seems to be waste, because we all want to test as many actual live compounds as possible, but then you might get data that you cannot interpret. And then the whole study is worthless in the end. So that's the kind of know-how we bring to the table.
I was going to mention exactly that with you, that actually you've seen some clients will come to you and say, I want to do this. And you could sit there and go, well, you know better than me, so we'll run that. But if you've literally seen the exact same thing fail and cost people tens of thousands of pounds of wasted budget, well, why would you not tell them? Like, the only benefit was to your target, right? So to share that information confidentially, that I've seen something similar, we don't recommend you do it that way, is nothing but valuable to them.
And it's valuable to the entire industry, right? Hopefully in the long run, it will mean that patients can get drugs that actually benefit them at a lower price. So we'll make healthcare as well. I'm always trying to look at the bigger picture too. And I think we are in this really exciting era where we have a lot of advancements, largely thanks to AI right now. I think it's really picking up right now. It's just a really exciting space to be operating in. But there's a lot of unknowns. And people will be burning money along the way, because sometimes you don't know how good these predictions are. ChatGPT is hallucinating. We all know it. Whether or not that should be classified as lying, I think someone needs to look at that, right? But I can mention to a client, well, hold on, I've seen it hallucinate before. You might want to double check that link that it has provided for your prediction, that it actually exists.
Yeah.
And then that can save a lot of money. And then further down the line, it will reduce, hopefully, the R&D costs, because that, again, is another really worrying trend, is that R&D costs are just rising and number of new drugs is not increasing, which means we are just spending more and more money and not getting the outcome we need overall as an industry.
So are you seeing people come to you, just as a side note, with like experimental plans that they've drawn up through ChatGPT and different systems, or?
So people are using it in like different shapes and forms. Some people are bolder than others. I've just been to an AI conference in London, and I've seen an interesting use of large language models, which is actually to democratize AI. I don't know if you heard of this concept before. So basically the idea, a large pharma in particular, is now they have built all these models, but the majority of the workforce is unable to use them. So they actually make their own ChatGPT within the micro environment, where you can now just ask one question, which is your question. So your only job was, as a chemist or a biologist, is to define the question. And then ChatGPT is going to pull the different models in the background together to give you the answer to it, which I think is a genius use, because, as much as we are unable, I'm a biologist, we are unable to understand the code as much as arguably we should try harder, probably. But we will probably never get there to the level. And if these language models are enabling us all to use these models more, I think we can get really creative. And I think the sky is the limit as to what we can get out of it. So that's the new use of the language models that I've just seen. And I find it quite intriguing overall.
So do you see that then as, okay, so if one of the value adds that CROs have is the advice or some of the strategy that they can help provide to these to companies, do you see that as a threat to CROs? If I can, as a scientist, just go log into my Pfizer GPT and ask it a question and get my answer?
I guess there will come the day when none of us will need to think and just type questions, but I don't know how soon that's going to happen. So these systems are locked within the organization, right? So nobody has access to it. Of course, there's a question around open access. I don't see the large pharma releasing these anytime soon, do they?
Yeah, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Yeah.
That's for our 6 children to worry about.
Yeah,
like, if anyone's just joined, I mean my 3 and your 3, not our 6. Like, we don't have 6 together.
Yeah.
You have 3 and I have 3.
3 separate ones.
Yeah,
each.
3 separate sets of children. For their generation to worry about.
I doubt my husband is going to watch this one back, but to be safe, let's
Just
make
to be clear
out there. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, actually, on like overall how much our thinking is going to be required on the long run, because frankly, ChatGPT knows a lot more papers than I have ever even heard of, right? But I think where we come in as human beings is the type of questions we can ask. And then where us come in as CROs is that, of course, all of those previous experiments that were run, and we have recognized that making this protein costs $20,000. And, that's like a huge impact on the budget, would never be something that could be retrievable from an AI. It's like this human lived experience, if we can call it that. I'm really clutching at straws because I hope we will continue to have a job, obviously. And then maybe creativity around it, as well as like how you mix between timeline pressures, budget pressures. You want to bust a patent, but you have to follow the patent, even though they used an essay that was like popular in the 80s, and there's so many better essays now out there. But if you want to bust it, you have to use the same one because no one's going to believe you that you have a better asset. These sorts of things still require, I think, a bit of a human touch. And I guess there's a lot of psychology in there as well, because ultimately our clients are the biotechs, but really the client is the VC behind, or the pharma who's going to buy these assets, because ultimately that's the source of the funding for the research. So we all need to think like quite high level and position things the right way. And these are the sort of relationships I enjoy the most, because we really truly feel like we're a part of the team. And yes, we are contract research, so they pay for the contracts that are in place. But our input is welcome, and we can feel like we own a chunk of the project and can be very proud when it progresses. If an asset goes to a phase 1, phase 2, I feel like I've contributed something, even though I've never been in the lab myself personally. And literally all I've done is added an extra control. But still, it's a contribution to something tangible. So that's what makes me really excited about my job. And I happen to also make money for the company, obviously, and help us grow and make sure that we achieve the margins we need to achieve to then be able to service the industry better in the future.
I actually think that for anyone who listens to this, potentially who's thinking of making a move from the lab into the sales process, that actually I've been involved in projects in the lab for large pharma where they progressed through and became either a drug or into phase 1 or whatever. And I've got that sense of achievement. And like you say, if I've been heavily involved in helping with projects, I get the same level of that feeling of achievement as I did for when I was part of the company as when you're external, because you say you're a partner, you're actually supporting. And I think that's the key part of it that I really enjoy.
Yeah, totally. Thought leadership.
Yeah, you get to have your hands in a bunch of different stuff too, right? So it's not only you're on one project forever, you have your hands in a bunch of different ones that you can help contribute to. Even if you just have one contribution, it's great.
Harrison's seen my attention span. Can you imagine me on a 5-year project? God, like that. I
can barely keep your attention for 35 minutes to record a podcast.
Patience is a virtue that I lack too, unfortunately. So exactly. I got very excited with the readiness of precision medicine and personalized treatments, and this largely contributed to my jump to clinical trials. But then I had to face up to the fact that if I thought animal studies were long, some of them would be 6 months long. I was thinking, when are we going to see the data? When we started discussing some clinical trials 15 years, I was just thinking of myself, with the walking stick and trying to harass the wives of my kids or husbands of my kids to let me into their homes as the mother-in-law, because that's no matter what. It was just too long term for me. And actually coming back to early drug discovery is really exciting. The pace, it's slightly crazy. I think if anything, it makes me even less patient, which maybe I should actually be striving to get to normal patience levels instead of faster. But my mind really enjoys the challenge. And also there's all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas that are out there that people are daring to break the norm and don't want to follow the normal drug discovery process, which is you need to find a hit, then you need to validate it, then you need to get from your hit to your lead. And there's a preset number of experiments that used to be compulsory to do. And they're not anymore. With the advent of AI, we can skip some experiments, but of course there's always the risk that it wasn't tested, right? So ChatGPT told us that it's not going to be toxic. That doesn't mean we should give it to a human being, maybe. This is not quite yet. But at the same time, the time saving is incredible and the money saving is incredible. And the new ideas are just incredible to see overall.
Yeah. I guess the question there is I totally see the time savings, but is there actually a monetary savings if you don't do a lot of that validation work early? Because then you're kind of moving to more expensive things faster. So it's you might be going to trials quicker, or you might be trying to do more expensive studies faster, which I don't know, might have a higher percent chance of failure. Whereas if you had validated it earlier, you could have cut it off before it even made it there.
The people who cut these corners have a different attitude to risk. So it comes with a certain type of a profile, and it also means they will fail faster. So I think they just move a lot more aggressively. So let's say before you would take one target that's your favorite target and you want to develop a drug for it and you just nurture that one. And then when you are getting to these experiments that are a bit questionable whether or not this is still a good idea to progress with, because you only got this one, you're not going to let go of it. And you are going to continue, honestly, wasting money on trying to get it to the clinic. I think if you look at success in clinical stages, it's pretty low. So as I think we see right now, majority of assets have been developed this nurturing the baby way. The new way to do it is that you don't get attached. You do 10, 20 simultaneously. And yes, you cut corners here and there, but your thresholds for failure are also much higher. and you don't take any prisoners. So if doesn't look good, you move on
Got
to
it.
the next.
Interesting.
Why
And
I
I
had
think
3 kids.
overall save
Principle.
money this way. Sorry, Nick?
That's why I had 3 kids. Same principle. One of them will be successful. The rest we're going to get out of the way.
Let's just keep going. There you go. Yeah, I think it, overall it will balance itself out as cheap air. That would be my bet, and we will have maybe higher success rate in clinical trials as well. Of course, there's also a risk of us dropping something that could be really good. I think right now we have a 95% attrition rate, so
yeah, at least, right? Yeah.
pretty much nothing gets
So
to
the
patients.
cheaper so the theory is the cheaper and quicker you can get candidate drugs or therapeutics to clinical is actually how you save the money, not by failing before clinical, because most drug candidates fail at clinical anyway, right? Is that what we're saying? So a lot of ones, so we get them there quickly with good enough data, and then we get them out of that process quickly as well.
I think on both ends, we need to just fail quicker. But for that, we need people to not to have just one project, because something to understand from the actual project leader's perspective, that project is their job. So if they were to say this target is not a good target, they might not have a job to come to on a Monday.
Oh, interesting.
So I think we need like a whole like reformatting of these job roles. And this is where AI companies are incredibly good, if you ask me, because they have like, again, much less attention span, moving much faster. Whilst at large pharma, I think traditionally people have been confined to groups that are largely defined by a target because they're expert in the target, which is fantastic, right? But if somebody is expert in, I don't know, one of the MAP kinases, then, I mean, they're expert in signaling, I would say, and kinases and phosphorylation, and they can probably repurpose their skills. But I think traditionally it's been really like an entire department being X overall. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, that's great insights. But we're coming up right on time. So I have one last final question for you. We'd like to end with something tactical, some sort of piece of advice that we could give to other sales reps out there. What would be something that you would recommend to them? Maybe something along the lines of how we were talking earlier. Some of the how do you dig into those deeper discovery level questions that identify that problem?
Yeah, I think my advice would be to listen. It's really hard to do because you have a sales pitch, right? Most of us will have a slide deck, have to get through the slide deck, and in the end also have to establish when are they going to do, what are they going to do, and how much is it going to be worth. But it's really a good idea to sit back and listen, and also like observe the clients to really get to know them as a person, and then be able to partner with them that way, and then go on a journey together. I think overall you get a much better sales outcome if you approach discussions this way. I would say even if it's a product, but I've never really been selling products, so wouldn't want to venture into that too much. But for service, definitely building relationship is key. And if people feel listened to, even if you disagree with them at the end of the call, I think they're going to take it much better overall and then hear you out on the long run. So that would be my advice, I think. Tactical listening.
Yeah, that's good. Tactical listening. I like that.
Right.
That's a good way to end this. Awesome. Kinga, well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all of your wisdom. Congrats again on the promotion. And thanks so much.